Beaten by the Kingpin, Peter and Harry need to learn about their suits and go to their resident tech expert, Dr. Otto Octavius. Welcome to the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into digestible bites to help you understand, then we read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Last time, Peter revealed his secret to his family after getting his butt kicked by the Kingpin. Realizing how weak they are, Peter and Harry go to learn more about their suits so that next time they might have a fighting chance. This is Ultimate Spider-Man 7 and 8. I hope you enjoy. Oscorp Industries. Dr. Otto Octavius rises up on his platform, admiring the Green Goblin armor. It's a beautiful thing, don't you think? Otto whispers. Below him, Spider-Man takes a bite of his sandwich. Sure, I guess, he says with a shrug. Peter glances at Harry, who quickly explains that Otto is one of the smartest men working for Oscorp. Otto nods, turning around and looking at the pair. This suit is a work of art. Complicated, but elegant. I think I finally have my head wrapped around it, Otto explains. Otto explains that both of their suits are Stark Tech, but were built using two different types of engineering. He motions over his shoulder at the Green Goblin armor. Harry, your suit is a dedicated piece of sophisticated hardware. Top of the line. I'd call it the perfect war machine, Otto says, explaining that they can customize it to the exact type of battle suit that Harry needs. But then he turns to Spider-Man as the hero takes another bite of his sandwich. But this Picotech of yours, it's beyond that. It's highly adaptable, transformative. It's going to take some more time, Otto says. He steps forward and pokes a needle into Spidey's hand, taking a small sample of the Picotech. Otto places the sample on his desk before turning back to the pair, explaining that both suits work independently, but are on the same network. He smiles at them both and looks at his notes. But here's the amazing thing. Both suits have been running in a kind of safe mode. They both have an onboard AI that you can use for combat analytics, life support, even higher function problem solving, Otto tells them. He taps the pad and explains that they just need to map the AI and give them a profile. Think of it like a personality. I've prepared several archetypes, he says, looking at Spidey, who shrugs. I like to talk to myself, Spidey says. Otto turns to Harry, who is staring at the armor. Harry turns back, questioning if they have enough data to put his father's personality into the AI. Otto ponders the question for a moment. It should work, he finally admits. Meanwhile, Ben and Jonah are meeting a mysterious informant in a parking garage. The shadowy figure calls them over, and Jonah arrives in a huff. Nice ambiance. Very cloak and dagger. Why are we meeting down here? Jonah demands. Robbie Robertson steps out of the shadows with a smile. Well, Jonah, I wanted someplace private. This is private, he says. Jonah begins to complain about his back and knees and having to go up and down so many stairs. But Ben cuts him off, asking why Robbie wanted to meet. What you got for us? Ben asks. Robbie hands them an envelope, and the two men look through the papers, both getting excited. Ben, this is, Jonah begins to whisper. Ben nods and looks back at Robbie, wondering why he is giving this information to their fledgling news source. Both of you know this isn't getting published at the Bugle, Robbie points out. The pair ask why he doesn't leave and come join them. We just got some money from a rich lady. Why not come and join our cause? Ben asks. Robbie shakes his head, explaining that he will eventually, but right now, he can act as the inside man at the Bugle. Meanwhile, a hovercraft buzzes over the city. It doesn't show up on any radar and lands on a building that technically doesn't exist. A black hole in the system of New York. The doors open and Bullseye motions to Captain Britain. The building's locked down and the surrounding area is secure. You've got a 20-minute window, sir. Bullseye says over the drone of the engine. Captain Britain heads inside, finding Wilson Fisk in a lavishly furnished stateroom. The Kingpin is staring up at a painting of the Maker. "I never met him," Fisk says softly as Captain Britain enters the room. Britain nods as he joins the Kingpin. "It's not surprising. I always got the sense that he didn't like the people," he points out. The two get to the point of the visit, with Britain asking what happened to the agent that he sent. The agent that seems to have been lost. "I didn't lose him. He just decided to up and disappear," Fisk explains, detailing that all the footage of the attack was lost when the attackers used a localized EMP. "A pity," Britain says as he pours himself a drink from the bar. He takes a sip and looks back to Fisk. "It seems you were right and I was wrong. This has grown into a much larger problem than I first believed," Britain says, a hand absently reaching up for the eye he'd recently lost. But he motions to one wall which slides away. "But I have a solution. I come bearing gifts," he explains. Fisk turns to the expanded room and regards the squad of bullseyes that stand at attention. "An entire team of my agents. I don't have a concrete plan, but there are worse ideas than throwing numbers at it," Britain explains. But Fisk shakes his head, telling the leader of the city that he doesn't need agents. "I know my adversaries can be beaten. I know how to do it, and I will do so on my terms," Fisk says. Britain smiles at him. "Well, look at you, behaving like the king of his own kingdom," he says as he takes another sip of his drink. "And will you offer me a small hint of your plan?" he asks. Fisk just smiles. "I do not have a plan. I have 6 of them," he says softly. Later, at an Oscorp warehouse, Green Goblin is launched across the room as Spidey hits him in the face. "Not gonna lie, I felt that," Harry groaned. Peter offers him a hand up. "Sorry about that," he says to his friend. They look back over to Otto, who has set up his computers. "Get what you need?" Harry calls. Otto nods and hits a few keys, telling the pair that he is ready to activate the AI programs. An energy surge runs through both suits, and Harry and Peter look around in surprise. "I'm not sure," Harry begins to say, but the voice of his father cuts him off. "All right, son, show me what you're made of," Norman says. Harry nods and glances at Peter. "Hey, sorry about this, but my dad says I need to kick your ass," Harry explains. Meanwhile, Peter is hearing his own voice running through the suit, telling him how great a dad he is and how his family is the best. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea," Peter jokes. The two launch at each other, with Harry dodging Peter's attacks this time. He reaches out and grabs his arm, pulling him in and cracking him across the jaw. "Good, good," Norman says. But Peter takes the force of the blow and flips through the air, firing a web and pulling himself in to punch Harry hard enough to knock him to the ground. "Soft, soft, soft," Norman mutters. Harry fires a laser blast, but Peter dodges around it, swinging in to hit him again. "I always wondered just how weak you were, Harry," Norman continues as the pair trade blows back and forth. "Son, you're embarrassing me," Norman tells him. Harry lets out a scream of rage and hits Peter with a full blast from his chest cannon. Spidey sails through the air, slamming into a stack of crates. "Ow, we okay?" he asks himself. The AI immediately chirps up. "Yeah, our diagnostics are within acceptable levels. We're fine. But Harry, he needs therapy," Peter's AI says. Harry stands there. His chest is smoking as he breathes heavily. "Well, Dad, how was that?" he asks. The Norman AI pauses for a moment. "Acceptable," it finally admits. Harry crosses the room, helping Spidey to his feet. But Otto suddenly gets worried and begins to work frantically on his computer. Hey, little problem here. Another signal on the Stark network. I tried to lock it out, but there's a back door, he says. Light fills the room as a portal begins to open. It's here, Otto shouts. Harry and Peter drop into fighting stances as something comes through the portal. I told you I'd be back in 6 months, and here I am, Tony Stark says as he steps through in his Iron Lad armor. I just have one question. Are you a hero yet? He asks. August. Peter Parker is standing in his apartment, staring at the black ball that sits on his dresser. MJ pokes her head through the bedroom door. Peter, I think we're gonna be late, she says as she puts on her earrings. Peter shakes out of his daze and looks at her. Hey, you okay? Something wrong? She asks. Peter shakes his head and smiles. Well, I just have a lot on my mind, he tells her. She smiles and kisses him on the cheek before heading out the door, reminding him to get the candles when he picks up the cake. Peter turns back to the ball and holds out his hand. Black tendrils begin to shift off the suit, reaching for him, but Peter pulls his hand away. No, not today. We have a brand new no costume policy at Parker birthday parties, Peter tells the suit as he turns away. Well, that's disappointing, but tell the kids I said happy birthday, his voice calls out from the ball. Peter turns back in shock. How are you talking? He asks. I talk all the time, Peter. I believe we've even had conversations, the ball tells him. But Peter points out that the voice is usually in his head. Yeah, same as now. I'm not actually talking out loud. You're imagining this, the ball says. Peter stares at it for a moment, his eyes widened. Just kidding, the ball continues. Peter smiles and picks up the ball, its tendrils wrapping around him and turning into his costume. What else can you do that I don't know about? Peter asks, staring down at his own reflection in the shiny black material. Oh, I can do all kinds of things, Peter, his reflection says. Peter sighs and puts the ball back on the dresser. I gotta go, but we're gonna talk more about this later, Peter says before walking out of the room. 3 weeks ago, Peter and Harry stand before Iron Lad. Okay, I have a question about my suit, Peter says, raising his hand. Iron Lad looks at him. Oh yeah? That's the first thing you want to ask me about? Tony asks. Peter nods and asks why his suit is so much more advanced than Tony's or Harry's. Tony lands on the ground, his helmet sliding away as he explains that the Picotech was the last thing that his father invented. It's a very special kind of material that Tony hasn't been able to replicate. He felt that something as special as it needed to be used by someone special. Spidey's eyes widened. What do you mean? What makes me so special? He asks. Tony smiles and explains that Peter's name was at the top of the Maker's list. What list? Harry asks. Tony explains to them that the Maker had a database of all the heroes he needed to stop from existing. There's a handful of heroes he deemed mission critical to erase from history. They're the ones who had to go. Top of the list, Tony explains. He glances over at Harry. Who are you supposed to be in that suit of stolen armor? Tony asks. Harry shakes his head. Don't worry about it, he says. But Tony holds out a hand, taking control of Harry's suit and removing his helmet. Harry looks around in surprise as Peter stifles a laugh. See? Not so cool when someone else does it to you, is it? He asks. Tony glares at Harry. I know that face. You're Harry Osborn. You stole my birthright, Tony says. Harry steps forward and glares back. Actually, I paid for it, he says softly. Tony finally turns away and looks to Peter. He puts an armored hand on his shoulder. The Maker returns in a little over a year. Best get ready for him, Tony says as he turns away. But Harry stops him. Where was I? On the list, he asks. Tony shrugs. You weren't on it at all, he says as his helmet slides back into place. He boosts into the air. But if you're hanging with this guy, I'm sure you'll grow into the suit. So keep it, and the company. I've moved on to bigger things, he says before flying away. Present day. Peter walks out of the bakery with his children's cake, followed by Uncle Ben and Jonah. Ben coughs a little and finally gets around to asking his nephew the question that he's been sitting on. The paper launches next month, and when it does, we want you on board, Ben says. Peter looks at them both, surprised. As they walk down the street, he points out that he's been working at the Bugle for 10 years, that he has a family to think about and provide for. Are you really going to say no to me? Ben asks with a smile. Peter sighs. You're not making this easy, he says. Jonah nudges his old friend. That's not a no, he says with a smile. Peter finally relents and promises to talk with MJ about it. Well, tell her you're getting a raise, Ben says. Later, they all arrive at the birthday party at Arcades. There, the family has a good time, enjoying each other's company. Most of May's friends are running around, enjoying cake. Even Richard is having a good time, even though he has few friends to hang with. Later that night, at Fisk Tower, Wilson turns to his executive assistant as the sound of a helicopter approaching reaches his ears. Are they all here? Fisk asks. Mr. Wesley nods his head, informing Fisk that the last member of his lieutenants has finally arrived. The door opens to reveal Martin Lee, the CEO of Feast by day and the leader of the Demons Gang by night, who holds control of Queens. Martin Lee is also known as Mr. Negative due to his powers, though the rest of the city is unaware of this. Next is Walter Hardy, also known as Black Cat, who controls the Bronx. He is also followed by Sergei Kravenov, who gloats that neither of the other men could possibly hunt him. After he was exiled from Russia by the mutant rulers, he came to America and now controls Staten Island. The three men greet each other, joking over drinks, but they are interrupted by swirling fog. When the fog clears, it is replaced by Mysterio. Must you do this every time? Lee asks with a sigh. Mysterio shakes his marble head. No, but I do, he says. Fisk steps into the room, motioning everyone into the dining room so they can begin to discuss their plans. Black Cat walks by Fisk. Always up for fun and games, but we're one short, Hardy says. Fisk only smiles. He doesn't use the front door, he says. They head into the study to discover the Mole Man, and a few of his people have already come up through a hole in the fireplace.
Hello, Wilson. Must be something important to bring us all together,
the Mole Man says. Wilson nods and motions for everyone to sit, while Mr. Wesley hands out the folders. Indeed, Fisk says as he sits in his lavish chair. This city is mine, and what is mine I have divided over the years and given a portion to each of you. But now it seems our city has an infestation. Some rats have forgotten their place, Wilson growls. Kravenov looks up from the photos of Spider-Man and Green Goblin. And do you prefer the six of us catch these rats? Or should we kill them? He asks. Fisk smiles a sinister smile at his six. Actually, I was thinking we could make a game of it. And that was Ultimate Spider-Man 7 and 8. Was Harry's decision to make his father his AI the right choice? Is there something concerning about Peter's suit? And what about the new Ultimate Sinister Six? Well, you'll have to make sure to subscribe to the channel to get notified when the next part of Ultimate Spider-Man comes to the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and leave a comment down below, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.